On this week's episode of Walk a Mile in Their Shoes, we are at the Jordan River Trail in West Jordan, Utah, and our guest is Mike Brown.
Hi, I'm Mike Brown. I've been friends with Jared here for a number of years, been fortunate enough to have him as a friend and get to know him. And I am a self-proclaimed self-help, self-development junkie. I spent a number of years working on it, open to anything that would help in my journey. And I would like for you to walk a mile in my shoes.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, how you doing?
Good to see you.
Great to see you, buddy.
Thanks for coming out. I'm
glad to be here.
Yeah, I realized I haven't been here at the Jordan River Trail in, I don't know, maybe 30 years or so. Do you remember last time you were here?
I don't think I've ever been here.
Okay.
So never.
Okay. All right. That's great. Well, are you ready to walk a mile a little bit?
I'm ready.
More or less, right?
Yes, I'm excited.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Well, I'm going to start my odometer here, just to keep track of our progress, and
all right,
we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay.
So you mentioned that you're like a self-proclaimed self-help guru of sorts, right?
A junkie.
Junkie, yes.
I don't know if I'd call myself a guru. I am a junkie.
But
yes.
A junkie, yes.
Uh-huh.
Okay. We'll get into that. I want to know just a little bit of what you do kind of for your day job right now.
My day job right now is I am a wealth management coach. I work in the financial industry for a company that works with small business entrepreneurs primarily.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a little bit unique in that we're not like typical financial advisors just talking about financial products in the market, for example. We get into a lot of mindset and integrating that in with their investment philosophies and their business and all of their finances.
Uh-huh.
So there's some crossover with what we're going to be talking about, even though it's primarily in the financial category.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So yeah, you said there's kind of some overlap there with the motivating and things like that. Describe how you find fulfillment in that day job.
Yeah, and it would carry over, of course, not just to the day job, but just in general, right?
Yeah.
And it's really as basic as it sounds. The answer to that question is feeling like you're valuable and that you're helping other people, right?
Yeah.
As basic as that is, I think that's an inherent need for us as human beings to feel that what we're doing is valuable and it's helping others. We're not isolating ourselves. We're not just focusing on our own. And that's a key point with what we're talking about, even with self-development. We say self-improvement, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The interesting thing about that term, when you think about it, or those terms, is that it really comes down to almost always anything that's effective involves helping others. It's actually not just about the self. So the long answer to your question is anytime I make a connection on any level in any subject within the scope of that job, because that's what you asked me about, we get into a lot of different areas, a lot of different subjects. It all comes down to did I actually help this person? Did I make a connection where I was able to give them something that was valuable? That's the most fulfilling thing I think that we can experience as a human being when it comes down to it.
Yeah. That's really fantastic, because there's so many people out there who may not find fulfillment in their quote day job, right? Mm-hmm. And so would you say that giving something valuable to somebody and helping them will help you find that fulfillment? Does that sound right?
Yeah. And that's an excellent point. And then you get into, there may be other things that you're feeling called to do, which you want to pay attention to, right? Mm-hmm. If you're in the quote unquote wrong day job, or just there's more that you want to do. That's the first part of that question, right? The first answer. But yeah, let's say because of your life circumstances, you're in a job where you're trying to be responsible and you can't just quit and maybe do other things right away that you're wanting to do. There is plenty of opportunity to reach out and be resourceful and find ways that you can help other people, even with the life circumstances the way they are, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes I think we get too caught up in tomorrow and when this happens, then I'll be happy. And it's always about changing our life circumstances. And then that becomes someday, right?
Yes.
And that's an epidemic that we need to look at. Someday I'll be able to retire. Someday it'll be the weekend, right? We're putting our whole life off because until the circumstances have all aligned perfectly, and then we can be happy and fulfilled. Well, when you think about it, the first thing is to define what we really want consciously, right?
Yeah.
So what does being happy mean? And that's, now we're circling back to what we're talking about. What we really want is fulfillment, right?
Yeah.
And so if we can, and again, we're oversimplifying a little bit here, but basically fulfillment is going to come from feeling important and feeling like we're servicing and helping others. So now, knowing that that's the real goal, you can then do a reset and say, okay, even if I can't leave my job, even if it feels unfulfilling in and of itself, my life does not have to feel unfulfilling as a whole.
Right. That's great. Such valuable counsel, I feel like, that you just gave there, especially for people who are waiting on things, just always waiting for something else, right? Yeah, I love that. I love that a lot. So when the quote day job is over, tell me what the rest of the time looks like for you in terms of that helping others and providing valuable things outside of that context you were just describing.
Yeah, when the day job's over, well, I'm pretty boring by most standards. I think most people would say. No, I'm joking. Maybe not. And this goes back to answer your question. When I said I'm a self-help junkie, that kind of plays into where you're going here, because when I say this, this is me being authentic. I'm not saying this because it's the right thing to say. The truth is, 95% of my time, in some way, shape, or form, is spent on how I can improve my experience. I guess that's the way I'll put it here. How can I improve my experience, right? This emotional suffering that we're all dealing with, which I feel like is kind of the epidemic right now that we're looking at. I just became addicted to constantly searching for anything that might help, being open to anything. So getting back to your specific question, a lot of it's just that. I might go home and meditate for 2 hours sometimes if I feel like it, or dive into something that I can learn, diving into a video or a book. When I'm in my car, I rarely listen to music anymore. And not because that's the thing to do. I've just found myself kind of moving away from being as interested in things that are not going to help me. It just naturally kind of became this obsession in a positive way, right? So, I mean, the answer to your question is yes, there's conversations mixed in there. Sometimes I'll get onto my email and people from work have reached out and I'll engage. I guess the answer would be just looking for ways to engage in any way possible. If that opportunity is there with another person and they're reaching out, then I'll engage in that. And that feels better to me than just isolating, chasing pleasure. And look, I do want to say, because I brought this up, this just came to me. I have to preface this by saying, of course, we should enjoy, the pleasures of life. So I engage in that. That's one of the big reasons we became friends, right? I love a good movie. I love listening to music when I'm lifting weights. So I love sports. So I'm not by any means advocating that we eliminate all of the pleasurable entertainment from our life. But we don't want to become addicted to distracting ourselves with pleasure. That's the difference. So the answer to your question is anything that will help my fulfillment, help my growth. That's what I crave, and that's what I chase even when I'm not working.
Right. Wow. Extremely valuable counsel there. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so, Mike, I've known you to be almost on a higher level when it comes to mental health and sort of helping yourself feel better. How would you, let's say somebody who is just completely starting out in that area where they just don't know how to even get started with some of the things that you're saying. What would be kind of the most valuable piece that you would give somebody who's just really struggling with their mental health?
Yeah, and that's a great question too. I love that question, because I remember when I was just starting out, when I was so in the dark and it felt so hopeless. So there's two things that I would mention that I feel are the, in all of my years of studying, trying everything, a mind that's open to everything. As the saying goes, a mind that's open to everything and attached to nothing. I really like that mantra. Yeah. So that's how I've been, right? So I'm going to preface, answering your question by saying I've tried a lot of things, and a lot of things have had a very strong impact. Some things have just been interesting, but not necessarily have changed my experience, and everything in between, right? So there's really, I've identified two foundational pieces that will always serve you well. One is intention. Your intention to feel better is probably the most important aspect. And in fact, I think even in psychology, the therapist will tell you the patient's need and desire to get better is the most important factor in their treatment, regardless of the modality, right? Okay,
right.
So it's the same thing with anything you're doing on your own, with anything that we're talking about here. Intention, resilience, and just that determination. I remember from day one when I started up until right now, currently, there was almost this intuitive defiance in me that just questioned that we're just meant to suffer, right? Like, there's nothing we can really do about it. Maybe we're genetically predestined to be a certain way, or maybe our life circumstances mean we're going to be, and that just didn't sit right with me. So intention and the determination and resilience to do something about it and know that you can make a difference yourself, right? That's got to be in place, right? You've got to be resilient and determined, like, no, I am not going to stop. I'm going to find solutions. Okay. Now, along with that, the other part I would add to that, and what usually comes with that I feel like is a really powerful and necessary piece, is self-awareness. Cultivating self-awareness, because I feel like without self-awareness, until that's developed to some extent, and we'll talk about like what I mean by that. I know it's kind of a general term, but self-awareness gives you the ability to use the discernment and make choices so that you're not a victim of your circumstances, right? And when I say self-awareness, just to keep it simple, I'm talking about the ability to pay attention consciously to how you're feeling, right? When you get a stimulus in your day-to-day life, you notice the emotion, you notice the feeling, and you notice even what you're thinking that's causing that feeling, right? So that's kind of an oversimplified, I guess, definition, but you get the point of what I mean when I say self-awareness. So I think that having intention and determination, as cliche as that may sound, it's not, because that will serve you well. To just flat out, I use that word defiance again. It's almost defiant. I've told you before, it's almost like standing up to the bully, right? Like your mind has been this bully that tells you you're just going to be sad or you're just going to be miserable. And you kind of stand up to the bully and you say, no, I'm not okay with that. I'm not going to accept that that's just how it's going to be. That's what I mean with defiance and intention. And then the self-awareness is an ongoing practice for the rest of your life. Just make self-awareness almost an obsessive priority, where you're constantly paying attention to, what was I just thinking to make me feel this way? This feeling, how am I feeling right now? What story was I telling myself? Now you're shining the light on that, and now you have the ability to make a different decision, to change the thought, to change the feeling, right? So those two things, intention / persistence and determination, and self-awareness.
Oh, wow. Okay. You've had a lot of practice in this area, it sounds like. Would you be willing to share a time when your mental health was severely tested and you needed to work through it and even maybe apply some of these principles that you're talking about, right?
Oh yeah. The only challenge with this question is picking one.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I mean, some really dark times, which I will say first, before I give you the specific answer, that I have realized, and again, this may sound a little cliche, but it's coming to me, so I'm going to say it. It's authentic. Those times are really blessings, and maybe that's helpful for somebody to hear. If and when you're going through those times, I'm not saying that you should try to tell yourself that you're okay while you're feeling that. Let's make that distinction, first of all. Okay. It's not lying to yourself saying, oh yeah, I feel great now because this is a blessing. No, it sucks when you're in it.
Yes.
But in the back of your mind, suffering really is a blessing because it's teaching us something. Yeah. And so as I get to the answer to your question and all these things we're talking about, I mean, let's be honest, without the suffering, I wouldn't have been motivated to do any of this. Yeah. I'd have been complacent in my nice, comfortable little numb zone.
Yes.
Right? And that wouldn't have been good either. So first, let's remember that, okay? So plenty of really hard times. I've had multiple, as you know, I've had multiple family members commit suicide. My mother, my brother, within the space of 6 months of each other, my sister a couple of years before that. Yeah. So I've had that in my family and dealt with that, right? So that's one example. I've had, I've dealt with money problems. I've dealt with health problems in my life. So I've had plenty of challenges, right? Plenty of blessings to motivate me, right? And so going back to your question, so I gave you just a few examples. I will tell you this way. Which way you want to go?
I think I head this way.
Okay. Yeah. I will tell you what's coming to me here. One thing we have not talked about that has been helpful, because you asked, okay, well, what's been helpful? You know, what got you through those? What did you turn to?
Yeah.
And one of the ones that was not so obvious at first that I think is extremely powerful, but it's worth mentioning here because I've realized most of us have, if not all of us have, somewhat of a subconscious resistance to what I'm about to say. And that is surrender. Okay? Surrender is extremely powerful. I mean, in fact, I could have even mentioned it when you asked me what are the most important. It's right in there with self-awareness. Okay. Now, I mentioned I've identified that we have a subconscious kind of resistance to that, whether we realize that or not, because our natural proclivity and default setting is to take control. Yes. Stress and effort, right? And we want to control the situation. We want to figure it out logically. And now we're back to being ourselves, trying to fix ourselves, isolated. I'm alone. I'm isolated. I'm figuring this out. Which, of course, what does isolation and feeling alone do from a clinical perspective?
No.
Not very good, right?
No.
So here's where we get into whatever your belief system is. I don't want to alienate anybody's belief system. If we're saying Heavenly Father, God, Jesus, the universe, the universal intelligence, if that resonates with you, most of us can agree that there is a larger intelligence outside of our intellectual, logical thinking. And we cannot solve a problem with the same thinking and the same mind that created it. Okay? So once I discovered that, like handing over, surrender, and it doesn't have to be, you know, I mentioned that resistance. So I do want to tell you, just in my experience, I struggled with going back and forth. Well, is it complete surrender? And now I'm not doing anything. And you may come across that. Yeah. What I will tell you, what has worked is, you know, the message that I received back to me was, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can surrender and ask for help while you're also being proactive yourself. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So the long answer to your question is it's a combination. But surrender is something. The reason I'm putting emphasis on surrender here is because of that subconscious resistance. It's the area where we have to be more proactive, or we'll forget about that one.
Yes.
Our mind will sneak in, and before we know it, we're not surrendering anymore. We're back to trying to fix it all, okay?
Yeah.
So that one, more than any, you might want to put a little asterisk next to it and say, you know, use that as an ongoing practice for the rest of your life. Surrender. I'll do a self-affirmation and prayer where I just say, I'm surrendering all of my thinking. Right? For example, I'll just give you an example of what I would say in my head.
Yeah.
I surrender my thinking. I surrender seeing myself as a separated self, isolated and trying to fix everything by myself. I surrender that to you. I surrender all of the thinking of the separate self to you. I'm open to, I surrender trying to plan how I'm going to fix this. I'm open to whatever comes to me. That type of surrender.
Yeah.
That's when and when it comes down to it, I could have given you some other brain science, fancy sounding answer of other stuff I've learned, and it would have been really interesting. But you know what? That stuff didn't help me as much as what I just said.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So, yeah.
It's incredible. It's incredible. I love that. I love that idea of surrendering. You know, briefly, you know, people have a hard time with that word, surrender. You know, there's a lot of people out there who have a hard time giving up any sort of control whatsoever, especially when it comes to their own life, their own willingness to do things. What's something you would tell them as to how they would do that? How did they surrender that?
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking that question. Just what I will say, what I left out is I was one of those. It's sneaky. I didn't even realize that I was being resisted to it. I was getting caught up in science says we can rewire our brain this way, and this is cool. I was looking for the next shiny object, the shiny new object of self-development, right?
Yeah.
And all that stuff's great. But to answer your question, once I realized that surrender was like the key, the first answer to your question is you have to realize what the value is. We're not going to do anything that we don't believe is valuable as human beings, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing is, and I guess maybe that's why I felt inclined to spend some time on this, is we need to understand how valuable it is. Once we understand something is really valuable to us, then we find the motivation to do it, right? So that's, I'm glad we kind of got on this. We hadn't planned this necessarily, but we have, as you said, as you pointed out, what I said is there is a resistance to it, you know. And there's this term that came to me as I've been working on this, that's along the lines of surrender to win, right? Because you know we have this thought system that says surrender means giving up, right? Well, yeah, I'll surrender later when I'm too old to do anything, and right, that's kind of what we think of like surrender. But that's, in this context, it's the complete opposite. Surrender is just understanding that there's a higher intelligence, that is a loving intelligence that is waiting to help us if we ask. It's not going to force itself upon us, but it's there waiting if we just ask for it, right?
Right.
And it's extremely powerful. So what I would say to answer your question is understand the potential value. And then simply, it's one of those things that you need to experience. You can keep it very simple, because you asked me, well, how did they do this? First thing is don't overcomplicate it. I gave you some examples of what I do, and I still do it. I still keep it that simple even today. I'm surrendering my thinking about this. I'm surrendering what I think my solutions would be, and I'm open to any insight. I'm handing it over to you. That's simple, right? So you just hand it over in your own words, keep it very simple. And it's really just asking for that help. And that opens the door where now all of a sudden you get the intuitive idea, or that certain person says something that you needed to hear. I think we've all experienced that, right? So all you're doing is you're taking something that we've experienced already. So everybody listening, I bet, can think of an example. Okay, well, what if you could just make that intentional and you could have that every day? Right? That's what we're talking about with this surrender practice.
Yeah, love that. Okay, well, believe it or not, Mike, we are right about 1 mile.
Really? I knew it would go by fast. Once we start talking about this, if we weren't tracking it, we'd be 10 miles in.
I have the same thoughts. Yes. Yes. So as we finish here, I guess just maybe some parting words, or just the most important thing you can pass on to someone who may be watching this today. What's the most important thing you want to share to pass on to them who's ever watching?
Anybody who's watching and suffering, I want to tell you, and I'm just telling you what's coming up for me, okay? Unfiltered. If you're watching and you're suffering, I want to tell you that you are loved and you're not alone. That's not a cliche feel-good sentiment either. I mean, you're literally not alone, okay? We cannot be alone. We exist only in relationship with each other, with whatever your belief system is, for a higher power. So you're never alone, first of all, okay? And that's one of the most damaging things, or one of the most threatening things and hardest things to overcome when you're struggling with something, is you feel you're like you're alone. You feel like nobody really understands, or you're a little more messed up than everybody else. Sure, everybody else has their problems, but I'm really messed up, right? But here's the secret: everybody's feeling that way, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing is you're not alone. The second thing is you are loved. I'm sending that to you right now. You are loved and supported more than you could possibly know. And you're not worse than everybody else, no matter what you've done, no matter what you're going through, no matter how bad you think you are as a person. I just want to reflect that back to you, who you really are, as you watch this, and let you know that you will be okay. There is a way out of this, and that's not just a feel-good statement to make you feel better. I am living proof. If you're determined and you have the intention to do it, and you ask for help, and you just don't give up, don't give into that voice that tells you this is just how it's going to be. Or any other authority, as well-meaning and as educated as they may be, there's nobody that can tell you what your experience has to be. So whoever's watching, I hope that resonates with you, and I love you.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Mike, for letting us walk a mile in your shoes today.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your wisdom.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.